My name is Sue Mosey, and I'm the president of Midtown Detroit, Inc. And I want to welcome all of you to our panel discussions that we're having related to our Cultural Center Planning Initiative. For those of you who may not be aware of this initiative, we have been working for about 18 months now with a fantastic design team, a number of local funding partners, and many of cultural center institutions on developing a connected physical plan for the Cultural Center District here in Detroit. So this includes landscaping overlays, lighting, mobility, stormwater, all kinds of other green infrastructure, as well as a digital transformational piece for the Cultural Center. And as a part of this, we're really excited to launch a new community engagement public platform for people to explore the district. And in association with that, 3 wonderful panel discussions that we're so happy that you have chosen to participate. So there is one panel discussion that's on green infrastructure, one on civic commons, and one also on public art. And we'd encourage you to take advantage of all of these if you can. And if you cannot, we're happy that you're joining us tonight. And we look forward to your participation and feedback. I want to thank all of the panel members, the outstanding group that we have assembled to really conduct these discussions with you, the public. And we would like to thank our staff people and our other consultant teams, including A. Kawaki and Agence Terre, as well as Root of Two and many others who are working with us to move forward this initiative. Thank you so much for joining, and we hope to see you back again tomorrow night for the next edition of the panel discussion.
Hello everyone, I'm Jean Riffard of the studio at Kawaki. I'm happy to be here at the launch of the CCPI.online platform. In the first phase of this project, our team produced an extensive analysis of site condition and institutional needs, and we're happy to share that work with you here.
Hello, I'm Anya Sirota of Studio Kawaki. In conjunction with the Going Public Conversation Series, we are rolling out CCPI.online, a digital platform designed to share the evolving planning process. We've envisioned this platform as an intuitive urban design tool to spark conversation about the district's possible futures. We hope you'll explore and offer your feedback.
Hello everyone, this is Olivier Philippe from Agence Terre in Paris. It is a wonderful experience working with a full range of institutions and people involved in this project. And as we pivot to the final phase of a guiding plan, we are delighted to continue refining the design with the district stakeholder institutions, the City of Detroit, residents, and the public.
And now for the main event. We will travel to the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History for a conversation around the future of nature in the city, hosted by director Neil Barkley and moderated by Maria Archiero.
Hello and welcome. I am Neil Barkley. I have the great privilege of serving as the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Charles H. Wright Museum here in Detroit. And I want to welcome you to tonight's presentation, The Future of Nature in the City. The Wright has really benefited from being part of the CCPI project, mostly because it's an opportunity for us to see, to talk with, and to share ideas and strategies with our colleagues within the cultural district. And this is something that, having worked in many cities, that I don't see enough of, the sense that there's a cultural ecology to the work that we do, and that everything that we do individually in our institutions really affects all of us. And this project really brings that to the forefront in, I think, an important and significant way. I want all of you to see tonight's panel, but also to give us your feedback on it, to tell us how it's working for you, how it might not be working for you, things that we might do, that we might include in future presentations, and just really become a part of this process as we develop this important initiative for our city. Certainly the future of nature in the city is an important topic for the Wright, as we have engaged in a number of sustainability initiatives since I came on nearly 2 years ago, looking at ways to preserve resources, to conserve energy, but also to bring to the community issues of both environmental inequality as well as environmental racism that exists in our society. And these are important issues for the Wright. You'll see us talk more and more about these topics as time goes on. But it's an important subject for us to consider the relationship between cultural institutions and the natural environment that they find themselves in. So with that said, let's move forward. I hope you enjoy tonight's presentation, The Future of Nature in the City. And again, let us know what you think about this work and these presentations online. We'd like to make them even more impactful for all of you. Good night and enjoy.
Thank you so much, Neil. And welcome everybody to this night focusing on the future of urban and nature in the city. Following the previous panels and the last 2 nights on the future of the civic commons and the future of artists in the public realm, these are 2 sessions that are available for you to see in the Twitch channel, should you decide to do so. Today, our conversation is gonna revolve around the examination of global trends and local solutions for integrating water infrastructure and sustainable systems in our public spaces. Following water in its crafting of shared emergent landscapes, we are gonna be talking policy and design, biodiversity and delight, ecology and identity. Detroit is often labeled as one of the greenest cities in the world. Paradoxically, nearly half of the city is impervious and challenged by the complicated legacies of its industrial past and its outdated environmental infrastructure. In the face of Detroit ecological realities, how can urban design reintroduce natural processes and make them tangible in the collective reimagination of urban life? Turning to landscape architecture, activism, philanthropy, and equitable redevelopment practices, we will discuss the agency of cultural institutions in cultivating, stewarding, curating, and mediating the future of nature in the city. Today, I'm not alone, and I'm gonna introduce our panelists. First, Jerry Hebron, Executive Director of Oakland Avenue Urban Farm. Good night, Jerry. Tell us a little bit about what is keeping you busy and engaged these days.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm from Detroit, Oakland Avenue Urban Farm in the north end part of the city. We run a 6-acre farm, which is food production, green spaces, education, nutrition, and community development. And we've been doing this work since 2009 in terms of food production. We run a very active farmers market. And then we do workforce development and youth engagement. This year with COVID, since March, we've been involved in emergency food distribution since March 15th. And we're still doing that work today in terms of feeding families that are insecure due to the impact of COVID. But I wanted to say that on the exciting side of this, at our farm, we've been working with a group of individuals to develop the Detroit Cultivator Land Trust, Community Land Trust. And so that's the most exciting part of our work that we've been doing this year. And I'm happy to talk more about that a little later.
Thank you so much, Jody. Welcome. Jody Rains, Executive Vice President of Programs at the Air Foundation, Air Family Foundation. Jody, what keeps you busy these days?
Hi. Well, one thing, I'm a proud owner of a Detroit Cultivator t-shirt. Thank you, Jerry. So I work for the Herb Family Foundation, and we around the same time, 2009. And we fund green infrastructure, environmental health, and justice issues in the city of Detroit and the region, and also arts. And we're one of the funders of the CCPI. And so at Herb, we look at our grant making through the lens of sustainability, or triple bottom line, where we try to harmonize ecological, environmental, and social, which we look at as equity aspects of issues in the city. We've been funding green infrastructure from the very beginning when we started, and it was really brand new in this city at that time. And we kind of grew up with the movement. I think we really played a role in this movement. And what's new these days is that we've been funding a lot of grassroots and research and policy, and helping get some organizations like Jerry's working on green infrastructure, and a host of others that we'll talk about later. But lately, what we've decided at Herb is we've kind of got this movement in motion in the city of Detroit. There's a real movement, and we are now focusing on how we use green infrastructure to reduce our combined sewer overflows. So we really want to hone in on what role, these wonderful benefits, the functionality of it is infrastructure. How is it really working? And I think every city is grappling with this. And we want to see if we can conduct some research, fund some research to really zero in on the direct connection to infrastructure and those combined sewer overflows.
Thank you so much, Yuri. John Birdsley is an author, curator, historian, and former director of garden and landscape studies at Dumbarton Oak. John, what is keeping you busy these days?
Well, as you say, I wear a lot of hats as a curator, a historian, a critic, and a teacher. I taught at the GSD for many years, and in addition to running the program in garden and landscape studies at Dumbarton Oak. I have some landscape connections with Detroit. I did an exhibition with Tyree Guyton about his Heidelberg project and wrote about that. I also did an exhibition years ago called Black Folk Art in America that came to the Detroit Institute of Arts. But as a historian and critic, what I'm paying the most attention to is contemporary practice on a global scale. I'm especially interested in the shift from project scale thinking to landscape scale thinking, and from a concern with how landscapes look to a concern with how landscapes function. And I hope we'll get into this distinction a little bit in our conversation.
Thank you so much, John. Welcome. Olivier Philippe, a partner at Agence Ter. Olivier, we heard before from you, but we want to know what keeps you busy today.
Yes, hello everyone. So I'm a landscape architect, one of the 3 partners of Agence Ter. Agence Ter is an office of urbanism and landscape architecture, mainly based in Paris. Rather than talking about or explaining the images that are on the background, I would just maybe say a few words about how we came to working on nature in the city. Probably the first when we start our office, the opening of Le Parc de la Villette, which is the first cultural park designed by Bernard Choumi in the middle of the 80s, was the first change of paradigm for us, the French, and possibly for all the Europeans. Suddenly, the parks were completely open, very flexible, totally in interaction with the city, and this was completely new for us. So the idea of flexibility, of multiple uses, of connection with cultural activities, this was completely new. The second change probably came with the turn of the 21st century, when we start to work on water management at different scales, including large scales for new developments. Probably this was due to 2 main reasons. One was economical. We tried to put on the ground the money that was spent underground. We had strong discussion with engineers. And the other reason is that we had huge floods in Europe in the 80s. We start to have huge floods in the 80s and 90s in Europe, in Spain too. And probably the idea of solving things on site rather than sending it far away was a new change in paradigm. We quickly understood that due to the climate change and due to the shrinking biodiversity everywhere, and not only in the cities, we had to change. We had to be more radical, and we start to work on this idea of living soils and considering first the project through the cross section that includes not only what's above the ground but also underground, knowing that this is completely interrelated. So here we are now. So the project that you see in the background are one of the last products of this work.
Thank you so much, Olivier. For sure, we'll come back to discuss climate change and how cities can can effectively start working on that. Ujiji Davis Williams, last but not least, Ujiji, I want to welcome you. Ujiji is a landscape architect and urban planner based here at Detroit, working for the Smith Group and also teaching. And I'm delighted to have you with us. What keeps you busy? You are also wearing many, many different hats today.
Thank you for having me, Maria. Well, one of the things that keeps me busy is my role with Smith Group in contributing to some of the cultural assets here in the city of Detroit. I've been working with the Detroit Symphony Orchestra for the past year, helping them realize a master plan for some of their areas, and specifically a courtyard that can serve as a fourth stage to some of the work that they've been doing and some of the musical outreach. And so really thinking about the cultural aspects of the city and how it is inspiring other institutions to evaluate their own position here in terms of what public common space begins to mean for the city. Outside of that, I have also been helping local Black club groups and community organizations in their own pursuit for community ownership, and just helping them navigate through some of the municipal systems that we have in the city to create a public realm that is community-led and community-owned. And so I'm sure there's some synergy with some of the work that's happening at Oakland Avenue Farm and with the land trust initiatives, but really just helping people visualize what their interests are, and then helping them by guiding them through the different steps on how to execute it.
Thank you so much. Welcome, Gigi. So, Jerry, Jody, John, Olivier, and Ujiji, I welcome you all to the stage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go. So let's get into the conversation, and I want to start with an essay that has been out there for already 30 years, but I think it remains highly relevant for the conversation that we want to have tonight. So in her essay, The Poetics of City and Nature Towards a New Aesthetics of Urban Design, landscape architect Anne Spern argue for a practice of urban design that would celebrate natural processes, make them more visible and tangible, would fuse function, feeling, and meaning, would invite participation and embrace multiple rather than singular visions. Poetics, a quote she argued, urge designers to reclaim infrastructure systems such as those for water as a domain of design. So I just want to start in here. What do you see the opportunities around this project and around much of the work that you are doing, working with different organizations at the neighborhood scale, at the district scale? But particularly, how do you see the opportunity of this project right at the heart of the city to advance this agenda of integration of environmental systems, performance, civic engagement, and then the role of design at the heart of all those agendas, providing some synthesis? John, I wonder if you want to get us started with some ideas.
Sure, thank you. That's a great quote to start with, because I think it establishes right from the outset those range of problems that landscape architecture can address. When Anne Spern was writing that essay, she was thinking a lot about Frederick Law Olmsted's work in the Back Bay Fens in Boston. And Olmsted was trying to reclaim a tidal marsh that had become very polluted and degraded. And so he was restoring a functioning ecosystem that also helped manage stormwater. So it was a tidal flat that, that treated stormwater and collected stormwater, and it became a public amenity that also contributed to the sort of social ecosystem of the city. So he was really thinking about landscape at the scale of the city. He was thinking about urban systems, both in terms of functioning ecology and in terms of social betterment, providing open space and recreation. So he was really thinking at the scale and with the degree of complexity that I think this project in Detroit is also aspiring to.
So, Olivier, I'm looking at you because it feels like the work, as you were introducing, just driving us through your project, but also through the many challenges that cities were going through in Europe, also in the 80s. The 80s were also an important time in the US city with a lot of changes in public investment. And I just wonder, how do you see the translation and the relationship of some of the work that you have been developing in European cities, and the translation to the work that you are doing here in a city like Detroit that is often described as a post-industrial city. I like better refer to it as a deindustrializing city, very much in the process. How do you continue to see the role of design as almost like as providing this choreography in between past, present, and future, but also bringing bringing people, but bringing environmental systems, you know, and making them really, really visible. Celebrating a little bit what you have been describing in some of your projects.
Muted.
He might be muted.
He's muted.
Well, the first, maybe one of the difference between Europe and the United States and probably Canada too, is that, except England probably, is that it works differently. Most of our clients are, and most of the projects in Europe, including the developments of the city, the parks, they are financed by the cities or by the state. So the public sector and the power of the public sector is totally different than what's happening in the USA. So the process we're having in Detroit is something that it's the first time. So I involved in this kind of process. It simply doesn't exist in France. It does exist in England in another way, but it doesn't exist in France. So I guess it changes probably the way you're designing and you're planning, and the way you present it to the you know, you can produce this landscape. The second thing is about, you were talking about water management. For water management, the water issue is the same everywhere. It's more an issue of climate in relation with the incredibly impervious area of the city, something like 95% in Paris. You don't count the Bois de Boulogne or the Bois de Vincennes, which has nothing to do with Detroit, because Detroit is only half of the city's impervious. But the problems are the same. We are at the end of a period where first we had a split between what was above the ground and what was underground. We sent underground all the techniques, and even the way the process, the way we're working, it was, even if it's kind of caricature, the engineers were in charge of what's underground, and we were in charge of what is visible. So this is over. It means that we have to understand the process of, not only of nature, but the process of the techniques needed for the city, and the engineer has to start to talk with us and understand what is the design. So the way we work has completely changed in 20 years, and I think that the project that we're working on clearly shows that. So, and in another way, if we go back to Detroit, it seems that the issue of nature probably is not due to the fact that Detroit is very green. It's not that important that it is in Paris. But the issue of water management in Detroit is huge. And once again, this is the legacy of, we have the same in Europe. Huh? We rely on, after the war, on big things, you know. We send everything underground, and we have in Paris the same huge wastewater treatment plants, only one in Detroit. And so this is, for many reasons, doesn't work now. It's, in terms of safety, it's dangerous, and in terms of health, it's also it's a problem with the releases in the Detroit River and in the River Rouge that causes a lot of pollution and probably at a certain scale health issues. So the project, what we did on the project is that we extended the idea of the water management. We just catch the two sewer lines that are crossing the site, and see how we could reduce the amount of how the amount of water that was in this utilities, in order to reduce the water going to the interceptor and going to the wastewater treatment plant, and then finally to avoid the releases on the River Detroit, just on the two, working on the two utilities that are crossing our site, but at a bigger scale. So it's about prototyping, something that can be replicate or duplicate, I know I said, at a larger scale, has a system that, of course, also produce a specific landscape, but not thought first has a technical thing, but more first as a landscape, you know. So finally, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Because I think there are too many important connections here that I would like to use to bring Jody in the conversation, because I feel there are two things in here. On one, we are going to be discussing this later too, but this idea of the governance of water, right? How we have gone from this notion that is the government, the one who funds and manages urban systems, to a system in which we see more and more the role of many different urban actors curating, implementing, and maintaining infrastructures. I'm very particularly interested to learn a little bit more, Jody, about the work that you have been doing with the Earth Family Foundation, mainly around issues of stormwater infrastructure, green stormwater infrastructure in the region. And then this other idea, I would like to know if you see this project in the Cultural Center as a prototypical project, as truly something that can be replicated, scale up, scale down, transfer, or you think that this is a once-in-life project, that we can extract lessons, but the level of visibility and intensity that can go in this project is going to be different than the work that Jerry is doing in Oakland Farm, or the way in which UGG is actually working with other community groups. And we'll discuss this, because I feel like there are different ways of looking at this, both governance and the role of foundations and citizenship, and also this idea of the prototypical versus the demonstration project. How do you see this issues playing out?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions there. Let me start, because I think we're going to spend a lot of time talking about these different issues, I hope. But let me just start with, when Olivia was talking about Detroit compared to Paris. So you can't talk about Detroit and water infrastructure without talking about the equity issue. And yes, we're trying to move from maybe government paying for everything to something more distributed. But when government pays, that's people paying. So the residents of Detroit have a huge expense. They're being asked to fund the infrastructure through their water bills. And there's not really much way of getting around that. But the city has recently, the water department has recently changed the way it's charging for stormwater, so that everyone is paying based on their impervious surface. And so it's hitting some people harder than others. But the fact is that, the city has to reduce the combined sewer overflows going into the Detroit region. The Clean Water Act requires it, okay? So there's a permit, and the city has to clean up its act, to stop those overflows. And they've spent over the years billions of dollars putting in underground, like underground systems, right, to manage it. We're paying the debt on all that infrastructure they put in, the ratepayers in Detroit. And now we also, in addition to paying the debt on the gray infrastructure that's there, we also have to pay based on the impervious surface that we have on our own properties. And good, bad, or indifferent, I mean, there's not really much way around it. I'm not saying like the water department's evil for making us do this. They don't have a choice. But what we're hoping is with this green infrastructure, so first of all, we'll give credits to businesses that put in green infrastructure to help alleviate the burden on the system. So we're hoping with this project, the Cultural Campus project, that each of the institutions will be able to get a credit on their water bill for wonderful, gorgeous infrastructure that they're going to be putting in. It's functional. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be all kinds of amenities, but it's also going to provide a function and hopefully help them with their single bottom line, in addition to triple bottom line. That said, the policies, this is all kind of new in Detroit. The credits aren't really designed in a way that it makes it easy for people to actually, businesses, people, institutions, to put the green infrastructure in. So we're trying to work through all that. You know, we're trying to get these policies right sized. And this project is not just demonstrating beautiful landscapes. Hopefully it's going to demonstrate how you can make these projects work so that you can actually get the credits on your water bill. Big picture though, too, we're hoping that this also demonstrates to the water department in the city that infrastructure is a solution. They can use this avoided cost, because if they don't get their CSOs down to zero under the permit, they're going to have to put another $1 billion of gray infrastructure in. Can they avoid that cost by putting in green infrastructure? So we need to prove that green infrastructure works. And if we can use that avoided cost to leverage it, like, how are we going to pay for all this stuff? Maybe we can get the city, you know, to invest in these projects so that they can avoid that cost in the long run. So it's kind of complicated. I just wanted to get that out there. The distributed projects though too, like what Jerry's Farm is doing, there's a bunch of images you see scrolling, residents putting in rain gardens. I mean, I think that we need, you know, everyone playing their part throughout the city. Whether the campus project is going to be prototypical, probably not. I think green infrastructure is very site specific, but it will be inspirational. And it will also maybe help prove some of the economics. So that's all I'm going to say for now. Sorry.
Now I'm the one muted. There you go. So I was inviting Jerry to share some of your works and some of your experience at the Oakland Farm. I think addressing, you know, many issues that are already emerging in the conversation. But I think at the heart of the work that you are doing is this notion around equity. And I wondered if you want to tell us a little bit more about how you see the engagement of the farm, your role as an activist, bringing the community together. There is education, but there are also issues around labor, around, you know, greening and, you know, food systems. You know, tell us a little bit about, you know, your work and how did you see the relationship with this other project that is grounded perhaps, you know, more in a different kind of imaginary at the heart of the city versus the incredible work that is happening at the neighborhood scale.
Sure. You know, with urban agriculture, in this city of Detroit, we're tracking about 1,900 different size scales of farms. So family farms, school churches, gardens, etc. And what we know, and thanks to the Herb Family Foundation for supporting our work in terms of urban agriculture and research in water, these projects, what we know is that agriculture is a contributor in a positive way to stormwater reduction, because we have mediated the soil, the water drains down instead of runoff. And so this is all good work. And what we are hoping to do with this is track, you know, and provide data that will demonstrate to DWSD that there is a benefit to urban agriculture in the farms that we have working in the city, and that in terms of the affordability, that our rates, that there will be a unique rate for agriculture, okay, which would allow more of our farmers to have less of an output in terms of their expenses and contribute more toward their sustainability. We also want to be able to demonstrate to people living in our communities, our families, that, you know, they can also contribute to the solution of stormwater runoff by planting more rain gardens and planting native plants. I'm a big proponent for native plants. We know that they have a very deep root system that is helpful, and that these gardens and farms can be designed in our communities in a way that is beautiful and attractive, contributing to a more inviting environment while we're working, to resolve some of these issues around the stormwater runoff. So that's work that we've been doing for the last 5 years in a more proactive way, working with the University of Michigan, trying to get some research done that we can provide data to the city and data to DWSD.
That is fantastic. So, Gigi, I'm coming back to you because I feel like in two of your many hats, you are also in a way, experiencing the work at the office with, maybe this project in which you are dealing with these notions of, how did you build identity? How did you deal with, the representation of the ambitions of these types of cultural institutions? And then you have the work that you are doing with community groups, and a lot of it is just the struggle on how to navigate the complex ecosystem of policies, and on how the loopholes for many of these groups to access the land. Can you tell us a little bit about that component, because I think it's also very related to some of the experience that Jerry can also share in the shaping of the land trust, and then some of the challenges that the project, the Cultural Center, is also dealing with, this bringing together different institutions and different universities to create a shared vision. How are you seeing these, these notions around collective visions and, citizens coming together?
Sure. So I'll start by saying that a lot of the work that I've been doing, I've been trying to root it in a lot of my background research, which is really starting with the city of Detroit. I'm not originally from the city. And so the way that I wanted to contribute with my skill set was really learning what it meant to be an agent, and in that role, really being a facilitator for people who need the facilitation to kind of get their end goal. And so in that, I've been circling around my own interpretation of landscape reconciliation and the idea of kind of bringing people back into their kind of rightful ownership of the land that was once very much a part of their identity, whether it was through legal ownership, but really just about what did it mean to be in Detroit, specifically here. And so one of the big advantages in working with the community groups is, as that agent, I can translate a lot of the municipal jargon, a lot of the zoning, a lot of those kind of red tape elements that are really hard to navigate if you really don't know what the steps are. And it's not lack of necessarily of information. I think it's just, are the steps actually very clear for individuals or groups that are not well resourced financially? What Detroit has, which is really powerful, is human capital, is social capital. There's people who are willing to put in the work and put in the energy to learn and build a skill set that will empower them in their community for years to come. Unfortunately, that is not always manifested with actual financial dollars, at least at the small scale. So it's really great when we have groups like Oakland Avenue Farm that is able to leverage support both on the human side, but also the financial side to really execute the work. So a lot of the challenges that I'm seeing is really not really knowing how to navigate the system itself and not knowing where to go for resources. So I've been fortunate to be in a position of somewhat of a middleman to help to delegate some of that information, and with my background in landscape architecture, help people in groups visualize what does a rain garden actually begin to look like. I think Detroit Future City has done a really great job in even building that vocabulary and the images and the kind of how-to guides with vacant lots across the city. And so I think that has definitely lessened the learning curve for a lot of groups that are really interested in taking ownership and stewardship of vacant land. However, I think there are people, when we're trying to kind of apply that to larger entities and to say this is what the community is looking for, there's still a gap in terms of how does that get visualized so that other people who are sitting at the table understand what they're looking for. And then just to quickly circle back with the stormwater and the green stormwater infrastructure, that is at the forefront of a lot of our residents' minds is water and how we're using vacant land or establishing local commons across neighborhoods that really help to demonstrate what green stormwater infrastructure looks like, the beauty behind it, the functionality behind it, but then also how can it be implemented at an individual residential scale that is low maintenance. I think that's also another component as well. Detroiters are very well known for the DIY, do-it-yourself, bootstrap personification, which I think is a beautiful entity, but it also then almost seems to delete the fact that we need help, we need support, we need capacity. And so there are tons of residents that care for lots that are not theirs, and then therefore cannot really care for their own properties. And so my role has kind of just been trying to facilitate some of those conversations between residents and city folk, just to kind of even understand the steps and say, this is what you need, and this is how we can get through what your vision is. There's a lot of players that are interested in helping on both sides. And so it's really just about communication and how we begin to communicate what is important as a community, as a block, and how that kind of funnels up its way up and down communication lines. You're muted, Maria.
I'm just trying to keep the silence down, but so I just wonder if there is an opportunity more than Maria directing the questions to you, for you to maybe respond a little bit, because I feel some of these conversations circle back to your comments, Olivier. I feel like perhaps one of the many opportunities that this project is bringing to the city is perhaps I don't know, to have a moment of maybe more exuberance, more promise, but also a moment in which this idea of the landscape as almost like as a medium to bring people together, but to negotiate plurality and to negotiate new collectives right at the heart of the city. I feel like there is something incredibly symbolic that can inspire, can maybe seed other kinds of imagination to the many struggles that residents in the many neighborhoods of the city are confronting when navigating the stormwater fees, or when navigating, how to turn their, backyard into a beautiful rain garden. So how did you see the project bringing a little bit that capacity? I mean, I'm coming back to you, Olivier, but it's also for you, John. When you hear these, these conversations around the incredible struggles that, many of the community groups are dealing with, I don't know, what are some of the ideas? What is the promise that landscape brings to negotiate, this kind of issues that lay at the heart of, identity and notions of belonging, but also how, how systems are also responding to larger social environmental issues. So how did you see this project as, seeding a kind of opportunity for the city?
May I speak to that a little bit,
Sure.
Maria? I just want to say that in Detroit, we have such an abundance of vacant land abandoned land, whatever. And in the work that we do at our farm, within our neighborhood, but also the activism work that we do collectively with some of the other organizations, one in particular, the Black Farmer Land Fund, where we have been raising money to help Black farmers secure the land, acquire the land that they're working on to secure their futures in the city. We had to look at certain requirements or certain things that we know are going to be needed to help these farmers be sustainable. So one is helping these farmers come up with a site plan. And a lot of farmers that we work with, we found out didn't understand what a site plan is or how to even develop it. So now we have to connect them to designers and landscape professionals to help lay the sites out. The other thing is trying to make these garden sites be attractive inside of the community, because a lot of people living in communities had an aversion to seeing corn growing or chickens running around. So you have to design a site that is welcoming and complementary to the people who live within these communities. And so that is, for us at Oakland Ave, what we learned many years ago is that, particularly because we are located on the main commercial frontage, that we have to build a site that is functional and beautiful. And we have to work with the professionals to make that happen. But in doing so, we want to make sure that people who live in our community are connected to it. So they have a sense of belonging within this space. And so that's the connection I see in terms of, working with designers and landscape professionals in terms of planning and building out these beautiful spaces. And particularly when I think in terms of our culture center downtown, that's one of the things that I'm really, really hopeful about, is there is a connectivity, within these sites, I'm sorry. Yeah,
you can finish your thought, yeah.
Between these sites, and that we can all, connect to and feel a part of.
I'll offer something that might be a segue to what Olivier and John might say about this as designers. So Jerry talks about people, connecting in their neighborhoods. Now, the thing with the cultural center, right, there are some people who live there, but it's not a neighborhood in the same way. So how do you get people to connect to these landscapes and to these cultural institutions? And they certainly they connect as visitors. It's beautiful and wonderful to wander through and to enjoy. But it's still, it's still a little removed from, it's not your neighborhood, right? I mean, it is kind of our cultural campus and our cultural backyard. So I think, but I think what's wonderful about these cultural institutions as messengers, in addition to the space being beautiful, we saw, and I think it's happening through the conversations around the cultural campus design as well. But I engaged in particular when the Charles Wright was putting in its Sankofa project. And so one reason that URB supported that project is the cultural institutions have a way of reaching people by appealing to their like pulling out their values and having conversations on values and things that mean that are meaningful, and then connecting that to nature. So a lot of people connect with nature just because it's beautiful or it's functional, but there's other values too. And so the Charles Wright talks about water equity. In the culture institutions, they're very well positioned to have those kinds of conversations and people's imaginations in those ways and help them connect to nature in a different way than maybe in neighborhoods.
I would also add, I think that one of the other challenges with the work that we do is that Detroit is still a city. So there's that kind of urban quality that I think is also kind of has to be maintained within the work that we do. To that end is what elements that then keep it inviting and keep it welcoming and keep it under the vernacular of an urban place. While we have vacancy, the expansiveness of it is not, those are not necessarily the places that people gravitate toward. People gravitate toward the kind of intimate, urban, dynamic spaces. And I think one of the really cool things about the DIA Cultural Campus is the weaving together of all these different scales of spaces that demonstrate different urban qualities. So there is the gathering space, there is the kind of intimate, personal, outdoor room space, there is the boulevard, and and being able to cross the street in a much more safer way, right? So I think that there are all those when it becomes stitched together, I think we begin to see a very different typology. But I think across the board, a lot of the work that we do also has to maintain that quality of urban and urban edge, which allows it to fit within the Detroit landscape, which is at this point kind of bordering between a little bit of urban and in some cases bucolic, with this kind of countryside of vacant parcels. But I think that is one of the goals, at least I can speak for myself, I won't speak for anybody else. One of the goals is to really try to transform a lot of that passive land into something that has a really strong urban identity, which resonates with Detroit history, but also resonates with Detroit future and the prospect of development and resurgence and all those kind of RE prefix words that we come to characterize Detroit with.
Just maybe a few words about the first principle to put all the institutions at the same level through this equitable access with the square. This was the first step. We thought it was very important to, if we wanted really to have a, I would say a cultural park or a campus or whatever, it was to finally to demonstrate that all the institutions were in a way at the same level with the same quality of access, with the same quality of public spaces in front of their building. The second thing was probably to rethink the inside-outside situation. Today, when you look at this institution, and this is for historical reason, the building was built like that in the past. The buildings are very introverted. So all the programs that could be at the edge or at the threshold of the buildings, if they could move there, it was for us a great benefit for activating the square and welcoming more easily the people. Then the ecotone was finding the place, two ecotones, finding the place where we rethink the landscape through the water management and through also providing other ecosystemic services like climatic comfort, because Detroiters will suffer like everybody everywhere in the world with harder times in summer. So the role of the ecotone is to respond to this, to the necessity of putting in place finally all the functions of the ecological functions of, and then the band plays a role also in a more, maybe in a more classical way, but linking through, especially through the Plaza, the DI Plaza, finally the two of the largest institutions that are the DPL, the public library, and the DIA. Extending this on both sides and activating the backspace of the DIA, re-including the CCS, the Charles Wright, transforming this today, what is the back today in the front space, you know? So activating through this few principle, the entire area of, in different manners activating the entire area was, are the main principle of the project. So, yes, the first was to put the different institution on the equitable access and with to treat them with equity. And then also, once you have done that, and that's why I was talking about La Villette, there's this incredible capacity of some spaces. If, like La Villette, you have La Cité de la Musique, La Philharmonie, you have the Science Museum, which is a huge science museum, and you have other places where you have a lot of exhibitions. And finally, the energy that you have in the buildings that you can put outside, and you can this is part of it. So the programming of this and the collective programming in the outside is also something which is crucial for the project too. So if we look now where we are, I believe, I hope, I don't know, that we reach 95% of the goals that we intend to reach at the beginning. Which in a way, discussing with all the institutions, discussing with all the actors that are, the stakeholders that are working, has expanded during the 2 years of study. I don't know if I was very clear, but
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that this is, you know, that is a good segue here because, John, I would like maybe to come back to some of the comments that you know you initiated at the beginning of the conversation. And one of the things that I'm interested in us discussing, it's something that has to do with the, you know, with the nature of green infrastructure. I would like us to talk a little bit more about stormwater management, green infrastructure, issues that have, I think, that bring to the conversation something important that has to do with management, with the management of the urban landscapes. Right. But also something that is important, John, because we are talking about a landscape type that is very different than the traditional landscapes that these institutions have been traditionally sitting on. So I don't know, we have been looking at incredible images, and I wonder if you want to, you know, share with us some ideas on, you know, how we go from here to there, and how we, you know, capitalize on the incredible opportunities for us to start talking about natural processes at the heart of the city.
Sure. Thank you, Maria. I think the first thing is to unpack what we mean by green stormwater infrastructure. So that's everything from things that occur in and around an individual building, like a green roofing system or bioswales around the building. And this green infrastructure stretches from there all the way to, you know, levee systems along rivers. So some of it's private, you know, some of it is green roofing and bioswales that get built by individuals or by developers. And then some of it is governmental, these enormous flood control levee systems, for example. But in between, there's a whole host of things, small stormwater retention ponds, rills, permeable pavers, cisterns, rainwater collection gardens. And those fall in between the private and the governmental. And those are the places that I think are most interesting at the moment, because they bring together community groups, neighborhood associations, urban farmers, cultural groups like this cultural center in Detroit, who have to come together to work on a common landscape that's both beautiful and functional, and that includes many aspects of this green stormwater infrastructure that we've been talking about. So, so there's a landscape in between the private and the governmental that everybody's working on, it seems to me, in terms of this project in Detroit, which allows for an examination of these kinds of equity issues, public access, and so I think it's both. It's interesting both from the standpoint of trying to establish a functioning ecology in the city, but also interesting in terms of trying to establish a functioning social or cultural ecology in the city. So that's one thing, trying to clarify what we mean by green stormwater infrastructure and who the players are and how they come together in the landscape to create this kind of infrastructure. The other part of your questions has to do with sort of management and change in the landscape appearance and how this is different from conventional expectations of a civic landscape. And when you think about civic landscapes of the past, they're either big plazas or they're enormous lawns, they're manicured, they're very, what people call formal. The kind of landscape we're imagining here, I think, is something that will be less manicured, that will have a lot of native plants, that will see a lot of water sometimes of the year and less water other times of the year. People are going to have to adjust their expectations of what a public landscape looks like. That it's not hardscape, it's not lawns. Instead, it's a functioning ecosystem that, that includes rain gardens, that includes farms, that includes rills and water retention ponds and green roofing and bioswales. So, and sometimes they're going to look beautiful, like bioswales when they're full of flowering plants look fantastic. But when in the winter, when the vegetation is dried up and all you see are the seed heads, people are going to think it looks kind of ratty. But actually, that's what a functioning ecosystem looks like. So I don't know what exactly will be included in this cultural commons in Detroit, but the point I'm trying to make is that the landscape of stormwater, of green stormwater infrastructure looks quite different from the typical manicured civic landscape, and that people might have to reimagine what a civic public space looks like if they want functioning ecosystems, if they want equity, if they want access.
Maybe I can just make a comment about just the CCPI and the water management, because you're right. This is an issue, John. This is an issue everywhere. I remember perfectly one mayor of one of the projects I showed that was on the screen, and the mayor, we were showing picture before the construction and how could it be, how could it look, and she said, "Wow, is this nature? Could you put some flowers in it?" And we did, finally. So we have to, and it's the same in Barcelona. The project we're still under construction in Barcelona. It's a negotiation between the functioning ecology and of course the appearance that should be more beautiful, friendly, and so it's a negotiation, and this negotiation depends on local context, the way you are, the place where is it located, the project, and of course the different actors of the project. So in this case, it will be also a hybrid version of, and we can reassure the Detroiters they will have flowers. But in terms of ecology, it will be quite efficient. And going back to what you were talking about, the fact that it's partly in the water management, the water is partly managed in private plots and partly in governmental areas. It's the same in the future districts. It's in many places in the district on both sides of the square. It will be a shared water management. So again, we're back on the issue of the governance. And the first issue is the water management.
And I think this requires a new way of thinking, that we have to learn to think beyond our own boundaries. And we need to learn to think at landscape scale, so that it's our responsibility to connect with our neighbors and try to create a landscape that works for everybody at a larger scale. We need to think beyond our borders and into a kind of common landscape that is more beneficial for everyone.
I would add to that the cultural component of these landscapes are also something that needs to be considered, and how we experience public space does differ based on our own kind of societal norms. And so really thinking about when we think about what a common space actually looks like, really beginning to further define what is welcoming, what feels safe, what feels like a place to gather in a communal way. And I know a lot of that also is tied into program and location and all those other things. But I think in terms of the core landscape and even components of heritage and heritage plants and agriculture and things like that, I think those are pertinent additives that need to be considered as part of this kind of common public green landscape that is functional and does all the things that we've been talking about, but also has a kind of a layer of cultural and culturally competent security, if you will, that is added. Detroit being predominantly Black African-American city, the nuance with the relationship with public space is very different. And so it's just something that will continue to be and should continue to be at the forefront of these conversations of it's part of our infrastructure, and it's something that we continue to tackle every day with the work that we do. But it is an added layer that we should continue to be conscious of, and I know I am. So I know that has been a part of a lot of the conversations around the cultural campus here, and I think we've begun to see how some of those spaces begin to manifest as what is identified as safe, and offering a sense of belonging.
But Gigi, I think that's a really important point, and just as ecosystems are more resilient if they're more diverse, so cultural systems are more resilient if they're more diverse. And yes, absolutely, when you are designing a diverse landscape, a biodiverse and socially diverse landscape, you need to encourage that kind of diversity. And as you say, part of that is programmatic. Part of it is recognizing that different individuals and different cultural groups use the landscape in different ways and also want different things from it. So I selected a lot of images of the Brooklyn Bridge Park to show, because I think the Brooklyn Bridge Park uses program as a way of drawing in a range of people. It also uses diverse environments as a way of drawing in a lot of people. So you have very wild parts of the Brooklyn Bridge Park, and you have formal lawns that are meeting places and event spaces. So you design a diverse range of spaces in a place, in order to encourage diverse users. And you insert a lot of diverse programming to, again, to attract people with different ambitions for the use of public space.
Right.
So, but thank you for underscoring that diversity isn't just a biological thing, it's a human thing too.
For sure.
You know, I'll just throw in for the policy wonks out there, if there's anyone out there. It's interesting because, you know, I mentioned earlier that the stormwater policies in the city aren't exactly aligned or, you know, perfectly aligned yet to kind of incentivize the kind of behavior that we want to see, these kinds of green landscapes. But they do recognize, interestingly, shared practices, and you can get, and actually sometimes those shared practices, the finances of that works better than individual practices. I just think it's kind of interesting when we talk about the importance of collectivism, that actually, in a way, our policies are at least the credits on the stormwater charge recognize that too, and can encourage collective action. There's another campus-wide project demonstration underway. I think the Smith Group is part of this as well at Eastern Market. So something else to keep an eye on is the Eastern Market expansion project. I'm drawing a blank right now what they call it. The Greater Eastern Market District.
Thank you, Jody. I'm gonna bring back one of the questions that is coming from the audience, because I think it's nicely connecting to some of the ideas that are emerging. So here it goes. Aesthetics are important. As John was mentioning, perception might need to shift to appreciate beauty. How do you begin to sensitize people to new ideas of beauty at the landscape scale? Once again, it's reinforcing this idea of going beyond the property boundaries of, you know, each institution and each owner, using landscape as a way of representing larger ideas, and, you know, how we start building something much larger together. So anyone wants to jump in there?
Well, maybe I'll take it. I'll take a shot at it. It is really hard to overcome people's expectations of what a civic landscape ought to look like, because our image of the public landscape goes back to the City Beautiful movement in the late 19th century. It's taken a long time for designers and people who really are landscape professionals to change their thinking, to open themselves up to recognizing that landscape isn't a fixed image, but it's a process. It's not something static, it's something dynamic. And it's you know, people look at a landscape and think it should be the same from year to year and from season to season, but that just isn't how it works. So part of it is engaging people in their own landscapes to recognize that landscapes change from day to day, from season to season, from year to year. So I'm really heartened by, and Detroit's a good example of this. I'm really heartened by the extent to which individuals, neighborhood associations, community groups are engaging with their own landscape, because that kind of hands-on experience of nurturing your own landscape is the way to learn that landscapes are dynamic, that landscapes aren't static, they're not fixed pictures, but they're things that change over time. And as you begin to appreciate that in your own landscape, whether you're working in a community garden or an urban farm or on your own rain garden, you learn that nature is dynamic, that landscape is dynamic, and you begin to appreciate that it looks great not only when the flowers are in bloom, but when the seed heads in the winter are feeding the birds. So it's getting your hands dirty that makes the difference, I think.
you know, Maria, the fall will be beautiful for 1,000 years. So I just want to make one comment about the perception. You know, I often show a place which is named the Champ de Mars. You know, so it's La Tour Eiffel is located on the Champ de Mars. 50 years ago, this was really what we call un lieu de représentation, a place of representation. I don't know how to say that in English. I remember when I was a kid in Paris, I couldn't walk on the lawn. So this kind of places was just to about you know, appreciate the beauty of the space, and people were also showing, you know, themselves. You know, it was kind of was a kind of a stage, you know. And suddenly, after La Villette, all the lawns and all the spaces has been open. And 50 years after, so I took a picture. 2004. You could see people having picnics, the bourgeois having picnics on the Champ de Mars, whilst the workers have picnics at La Villette, you know. And the way people feel the space and look at the space has changed completely, and the space is exactly the same. So it's a quite complicated question, and of course, when we work on ecosystems that are efficient and visible, which they were not before, you know, it's changing the aesthetics. So I was talking about this example in a project next to Paris, and the necessity that we have, at least for 2-3 negotiate, because the idea of the garden, and this is back to the idea of the garden, has nothing to do with the idea of natural spaces, you know. And this is something, of course, we need to change, but some will change quite slowly. So it's a quite complicated questions. And going back to the project, I think that what we try to do, and what generally speaking, generally we try to do this everywhere, is to prepare a structure that can evolve in the future, not only in terms of users, but also in terms of contents. Part of this landscape should be able to change without changing the structure. So this is the way we work, and I think that with the team, the Agence Terre and Aqua, work on this principle on the CCPI project. Simple structures that could be used in different ways, but also that could evolve in the future.
Maria,
so that's going back to the.
Could I jump in?
Yes, you can jump in, and then I don't want to miss the opportunity to bring another question that goes exactly for Jerry. But yes, John, I don't want to cut the flow. Yeah.
Just quickly then, Olivier raises a really important point about the changing uses of the landscape, and that what he's describing is really a way in which the landscape is getting democratized. People are starting to use these public spaces in their own ways. And I think that's a really important point to draw out here too, is that we're seeing greater citizen involvement in the creation and curation of public space, and people therefore feel more ownership, and they have a greater stake in the landscape. And I think it's all part of a process of democratization of public space that I think is really important.
John, I think that it's a very, very important point, and I think it connects nicely with this question for Jerry, that is actually asking about the situation in the neighborhood, right? At the heart of the many neighborhoods in the city, where we have seen aggressive blight remediation, pretty much erasing entire sections of the city. And then, there is still a memory of what was there before, right? And there is still a calling. And the question here is, what it is the landscape, but is program helping bring and re-engage citizens and residents in these areas? What are some of the things that you are seeing, work in the Oakland farm, and how did you see this other, I think very, very different scale, right? That is less in the cultural center of the city and is more at the scale of the neighborhood. There you go, Jerry. Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot I was muted. What I see in the North End is that we look at blight a little differently than, some folks. So, for example, we have 6 acres of land and structures in our possession. And what we know is that there are some structures that were tagged to be torn down, but we didn't want them torn down because we can take those structures and repurpose them for other uses. I mean, we knew the families, we know the history, we have stories that connect directly to these structures. And so they're not blight to us. It's a legacy. It's a part of our neighborhood. It's a part of our history. So, and that's very important in communities, being able to hang on and retell their stories and cultural legacies of these neighborhoods. We all have them, and each one of these neighborhoods are a little different, but the stories are what is at the heart of these neighborhoods. So blight, when we're living inside of these neighborhoods, yeah, I mean, they look a little differently, but we see blight differently too, because that blight is a part of our history. And so how do we take that and, repurpose it in a way that maintains the integrity of our history and our culture?
Thank you, Jerry. So it's almost time. We are a little bit over, and I just wanted to, not even as a mode of conclusion, but I just wanted to go because I think it's we have discussed so many issues from starting with you, Jerry, just basically calling for the landscape as a medium, as a means of telling stories and important histories and stories of place. We have discussed landscapes as dynamic and as democratic, landscapes as bringing people together, but also being, pluralistic. We have talked about diversity, not only the biodiversity, but also cultural diversity, the importance of image and identity in the landscapes that we produce, how we need new ways of thinking governance and management when we are talking about the opportunities to scale up many of these green infrastructures and the landscapes that we are putting in place. We have touched on the importance of balancing the social and cultural ecologies. We have discussed placemaking and placekeeping strategies. We have talked about equity and the importance of giving access and representation to all the institutions, to the citizens. We have talked a lot about performance and how that performance and how these spaces are welcoming and allow the appropriation by the residents and the citizens of the city. And then we have also learned about how green stormwater infrastructure can truly get us ready to have a better future that is not only more sustainable, but also more welcoming for all. I want to thank you all for what I think has been a fantastic conversation about the future of nature in the city, but also the nature of the city itself. I think it has been really, really provocative to hear some of your ideas. And I I just want to thank everybody. Wish you a good end of the year, and to everybody else in our audience to remain connected, share ideas, visit the website, and keep connected with the design team. And thank you so much, Gary, Jody, John, Olivier, Gigi. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, this is Sue Mosey with Midtown Detroit. Thanking everyone for your participation in the 3 panel discussions that we have held as part of the Cultural Center Planning Initiative. We hope that you have all found them very informative, and we are hoping that you will continue to engage with our project as the planning moves forward. Spread the word, and I'd also like to take this time to thank all of the panel members who have given us their time and their insights, as well as our planning team and our staff who have worked hard to bring you up to speed on both the initiative, but also many of the very important topics related to this initiative. Thank you again for participating, and we hope you will stay involved and engaged as we move this project forward.